On the morning of September 21st, 1996, a 15-year-old named Danni Houchins left her home in Belgrade, Montana. She was arguing with her mother. She grabbed the keys to a red pickup and drove east toward a quiet fishing access on the Gallatin River. Her mother watched her pull away from the driveway and did not know it would be the last time she saw her daughter alive. By that evening, her body would be found face down under a willow tree in 3 inches of water. By the next afternoon, a medical examiner would open her stomach and find something he did not expect. Not water, mud. And for the next 28 years, everyone involved would agree she had drowned. 28 years later, a fisheries biologist named Paul Hutchinson would sit in an interrogation room in Dillon, Montana, sweating through his shirt, chewing at his own hand, flinching at a photograph of a girl he had seen only once, in 1996, along the riverbank where he worked. 10 hours after that interview ended, he would call the sheriff's office at 4 in the morning and say 3 words: "I need help." By sunrise, he was dead. This is the case of Danni Houchins. Belgrade, Montana, sits in the broad valley between the Bridger Mountains and the Gallatin Range, a town of cattle fields, fishing guides, and railroad tracks that cut through the center like a scar. In the fall of 1996, it was home to about 3,000 people. Most of them knew each other. Danni Houchins was one of them. She was 15 years old, the kind of girl whose photograph makes strangers ask what she had wanted to do with her life. She danced. She was on a team that competed across Montana, and a few weeks before the morning she drove to the river, she had hurt her left knee at a street dance. In the photographs taken that September, she is wearing a brace on her leg. It is visible, bulky, unignorable, the kind of detail that makes her permanently 15. On Saturday, September 21st, her mother woke to an argument she would replay for the rest of her life. What it was about never mattered after that day. By late morning, Danni was gone. The red pickup gone with her, and her mother had the house to herself. Danni went to the river alone. The Cameron Bridge fishing access sits about 8 miles outside of town, where the Gallatin curves through willow brush and cottonwood. In September, the water runs clear and cold. Anglers came and went all morning. One of them noticed the truck. A young woman stepping down from the driver's side. Nobody thought anything of it. Nobody saw her walk down to the water. By late afternoon, Danni had not returned. Her mother drove out to the river. She found the pickup parked exactly where Danni had left it, the keys gone, the door unlocked, the seat still warm enough from the sun to suggest its driver had stepped away only for a moment. By evening, sheriff's deputies were at the access point with flashlights. The willow grove ran down to a slough, a slow, muddy channel that forked off from the main river. 2 of them pushed through the brush. One stopped. Danni was lying face down in 3 inches of water, partly concealed by the willow branches. Her clothes were displaced. There were bruises on her neck. Her body had been dragged into position. 2 days later, on Monday, September 23rd, the Gallatin County medical examiner Gary Dale performed the autopsy. He documented the injuries: bruising consistent with a hand forcing a head downward, cuts consistent with sexual assault, a bra pushed up above the ribs, clothing that had been pulled and repositioned. And then, when he opened her stomach, he found mud. Not river water, not the thin silt that appears when a drowning victim inhales a mouthful of river. He found mud. Wet, heavy, earth-dark mud. The kind you only swallow if your face is pressed repeatedly and with force into the bed of a slough. His official conclusion: drowning, cause undetermined. 28 years later, Retired Detective Cindy Botek would tell reporters what she had told her colleagues at the time. "People drown all the time," she said. "What do they find in the lungs? Water. What did they find in Danielle? A stomach full of mud. People don't drown that way." The detective who ran the case in 1996, Ben Farquhar, had tried to push against the official finding. The signs of assault, the bruising, the positioning of the body, dragged and hidden. In his view, there was no ambiguity. Danni had been murdered. But a cause of death ruling carried weight that a detective's instinct did not, and as winter closed in on Belgrade, the case went quiet. In December of 1996, Ben Farquhar resigned from the sheriff's department. He later told the Montana Free Press that he had thought about Danielle at least every 2 or 3 days for the next 28 years. While the file on Danni Houchins sat in a cabinet in Bozeman, the man whose DNA would one day be found on her body went on with his life. He was 27 years old in September of 1996, a graduate student at Montana State University in the Fisheries and Wildlife Biology program, an hour from the river where Danni had died. His fieldwork placed him on ponds and streams all across the Gallatin Valley. He was the quiet kind of young man professors described as dependable. In photographs from the period, he is thin, clean-shaven, unremarkable. He finished his degree. He married. He took a job at the Montana Bureau of Land Management, where he would work for the next 22 years. He raised 2 children in a small town in the southwest corner of the state. Neighbors called him friendly. Co-workers called him reliable. He had no criminal record. He had never been pulled over for speeding. He had never, as far as anyone around him knew, so much as raised his voice to the woman he married. His name was Paul Hutchinson. And 28 years after Danni Houchins' death, a DNA profile extracted from 4 hairs found on her body would match his, at a level of statistical certainty that the sheriff's office would describe in a single word: 100%. Investigators would come to describe what happened on the September morning in 1996 as a crime of opportunity. A man working alone near water. A girl who had come to the river by herself, no prior connection between them. No reason, in the life either of them had lived up to that point, that their paths should have crossed. Before DNA could take the blame for his decision, the case had to come back to life. That happened in 2019. Sheriff Dan Springer of Gallatin County reopened the Houchins file. He brought in a retired detective from the Los Angeles Police Department, a cold case specialist named Tom Elfmont, who had spent a career on unsolved homicides and had moved to Montana in retirement. Elfmont read the file. He agreed with everything Ben Farquhar had said in 1996. The medical examiner's conclusion had been wrong. Danielle had been murdered. The question was whether enough physical evidence remained to name the person who had done it. The evidence that mattered was already in storage. A small collection of hairs taken from Danni's body at the time of autopsy. 4 of them were what forensic scientists call rooted hairs, hairs that had been torn out rather than shed. For most of the 28 years since 1996, rooted hairs without intact cellular roots had been considered useless for DNA extraction. The tools did not exist. By 2023, they did. A laboratory in California called Astria Forensics had developed a technique for extracting DNA from hair shafts that had previously been dismissed. The hairs from Danielle's body went to California. Astria returned a complete genetic profile. It did not match anyone in any criminal database. The case could have stopped there. It did not. CeCe Moore was, by that point, one of the most recognized genealogical investigators in the United States. She had been part of the team that identified the Golden State Killer. Her method was not to search criminal databases. It was to search consumer ones, the public genealogy websites where millions of Americans had uploaded their own DNA, looking for cousins and family history. Working with the lab Parabon Nanolabs, Moore took the profile from the 4 hairs and began building a family tree, not of the killer, of his ancestors. Within weeks, she had identified all 4 of his grandparents, 2 pairs of names from Montana records, tied together by the genetic signature left on a murdered girl's body in 1996. By May of 2024, the tree had only one person at its center, a married father of 2 living and working for the state of Montana, a man named Paul Hutchinson. On the evening of July 23, 2024, 2 detectives drove south through the mountains to the town of Dillon, where Hutchinson now worked out of a small Bureau of Land Management office. They arrived without a warrant. They did not have enough evidence yet to arrest him. What they had was a DNA profile from 4 hairs and a family tree, and they wanted to see him in a room. They brought him in for what they called a voluntary interview. Body cameras recorded everything. In the footage, Hutchinson sits across a small table from Detective Elfmont in the overhead light of a conference room. He is 55 years old. His hair is thinning. He is wearing a plaid button-down and glasses. He looks, in every visible respect, like a man who has never been in an interrogation room before. For 2 hours, the detectives asked general questions: where he had lived, what he had done, what he remembered of the fall of 1996. He answered calmly at first. Then, slowly, the calm began to leak. He sweated through his shirt. He chewed at the side of his own hand, a gesture the detectives would later describe as one they had not seen in their combined decades of interviews. When Elfmont placed a photograph of Danni Houchins on the table between them, a school picture, just a 15-year-old girl smiling, Hutchinson flinched so sharply that his chair knocked against the wall behind him. They never asked him directly if he had killed her. They did not have enough yet to charge him. The interview ended without an accusation. He drove home that night. His wife was asleep. At 4:15 in the morning, he called the Gallatin County Sheriff's Office. The deputy who answered heard a man's voice say 3 words and then go quiet. "I need help." The line went dead. By the time deputies reached the house, Paul Hutchinson was dead. He had taken his own life. 2 weeks later, on August 8, 2024, Sheriff Springer stood at a podium in Bozeman and said the words that Ben Farquhar, Cindy Botek, and Danny's family had been waiting for, in some form or another, for 28 years. The DNA from the rooted hairs on Danni Houchins' body was a 100% match to the DNA of Paul Hutchinson. The case was officially closed. Springer said something else. He said that the suspect's wife and 2 adult children had not known, that Hutchinson had presented a face to them every day for decades that concealed what he had done. "They are also victims of this man," Springer said. In the weeks after the announcement, investigators began a review that had not been part of the original file. They began reading other unsolved cases in Montana from the years Hutchinson had been working outdoors, alone, near water. The Bureau of Land Management had sent him to dozens of sites across the state. The review is ongoing. The sheriff's office has not said publicly whether it believes Danni Houchins was his only victim. It has said, carefully, that it cannot rule out others. What Paul Hutchinson did in the 28 years between 1996 and 2024 is a question with a partial answer. He worked. He attended his children's school events. He voted. He took his wife to the coast for their anniversary. He lived a life that, from the outside, was indistinguishable from the life of a man who had not, on a September morning in 1996, done what the forensic record would eventually show he had done. That, in the end, is what the Danni Houchins case leaves behind. Not the relief of an answer, but a different kind of silence. A girl is still dead. A killer is also dead, by his own hand, 10 hours after a 2-hour interview in a small room in Dillon. Her family knows, finally, what happened. His family, just as finally, learned what the man at their dinner table had done. Danielle's sister, Stephanie, has said that she still thinks of Danni not as the girl in the photographs from September of 1996, but as the girl in an earlier set, the ones where she is standing with her dance team, laughing, the knee brace not yet necessary, 15 years old, and with every year in front of her. Ben Farquhar, the detective who resigned from the Gallatin County Sheriff's Office in December of 1996 because the case was going nowhere, told reporters in the week after the announcement that he had thought of Danielle every 2 or 3 days for 28 years. He said that the 2/3 of his life he had carried her in had not been wasted. He said that he was, finally, able to sleep. The case of Danni Houchins is officially closed. What remains open is the review of everything the suspect did and did not do in every hour of every year he was not at a river outside of Belgrade, Montana, on a September morning when a 15-year-old girl tried to spend a few hours alone.